Hello and welcome to our Energy Systems Fatigue and Recovery video series. Just like the Acute Response series, this will give you a snapshot of each of the energy systems, talk about their appropriate fatigue that is related to each of those energy systems, and then also talk about the appropriate recovery or best practice after using that energy system. We need to understand the key terminology, and the terminology depicts each of the characteristics for each energy system. These pieces of terminology are going to be very, very consistent across each energy system, so it's really important that you understand what they are first. The first and probably most important piece of terminology and the thing that distinguishes between each energy system is the rate. Now, we talk about the rate of ATP resynthesis. Now, ATP being the energy molecule that allows for all muscle contraction, the rate of the energy system depicts its output and depicts its capacity to actually support the resynthesis and then the overall muscle contraction. So the rate is how fast we can get energy to be repaired and resynthesized to allow for it to be broken apart again and allow for muscle contraction. This indicates and tells us the intensity that we're able to work at. So the rate depicts the intensity. Intensity is the level of exertion. So when we're performing, how hard we are working or the level of exertion that we are portraying is depicted by the energy system that is contributing the most. On the other side, the yield is how much ATP can be resynthesized. Now, we only have 1 to 2 seconds of ATP, but each energy system increases that capacity. The yield of ATP is depicted by how much fuel or the capacity to actually use the system or how long we can work without oxygen. Just like rate depicts intensity, yield will indicate the duration that that system can contribute for, or how long the ATP produced can last by using that energy system. This terminology is going to be very consistent across all three energy systems that we will talk about in the video series. Now, it's also important to understand the difference between the term anaerobic and aerobic, and also the terminology that you associate to each of these words. Anaerobic, in its essence, means insufficient oxygen. We always have oxygen. While you're listening to this, you're probably resting, so you have resting levels of oxygen. Your VO2, or the volume of oxygen that you're consuming, is very low. When your intensity increases, you demand more oxygen. If the body is unable to supply enough oxygen, this is where we are working with insufficient oxygen, or not enough. If that's the case, then we and our bodies have to rely on anaerobic contributions. Now, this can happen in a variety of ways, and that will be discussed further throughout these videos. There are two anaerobic energy systems, the ATP-CP energy system and the anaerobic glycolysis energy system. Both work when we have insufficient oxygen or contribute when we don't have enough oxygen. But they work in different ways and they use different fuels and they have different rates and different yields and allow for different intensities and durations. So linking each system into that key terminology is essential. But when working anaerobically with insufficient oxygen, using these energy systems, it allows for maximal explosive movements. And that is a key part when actually unpacking or breaking down questions. If you can identify maximal or explosive movements or repeated maximal efforts, then you will have to have and discuss contributions from these two energy systems. Unfortunately for us, these energy systems have a finite capacity. Finite means that it has an end point. It has a limit. Infinity means forever. Finite means that there is an end point. So these energy systems will terminate at some point. Now, it may be from its fuel being depleted. It may be from our muscle not being able to continue to contract at such a high intensity, and also due to fatiguing factors. And they will be discussed further in each video. When we look at the term aerobic, this means we have sufficient oxygen. It means we are using the aerobic energy system, which is comprised of two energy systems, aerobic glycolysis and aerobic lipolysis. Now, we don't talk too much about lipolysis because that is the use of fats and it's too slow, the rate is too slow, therefore its contribution is quite low when we want to perform. It is important during recovery, and it's also important during extreme fatigue where we run out of glycogen, our preferred fuel source. But when we work aerobically, and when we are wanting to work aerobically, we are working submaximally. We are sustaining our effort and we are performing for an extended duration. This requires a really large yield of energy. But unfortunately, to have a large yield, there's the trade-off in having a much slower rate of ATP. And this results in us not being able to perform at such a high intensity. Now, if you continue to fuel the aerobic system, it has an infinite capacity. It can continue to work. As long as you fuel the system, it can continue to play its role and contribute to ATP resynthesis. So anaerobic energy systems have a finite capacity, and the aerobic system has an infinite capacity, long-lasting or everlasting. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the unique characteristics of the ATP-CP energy system and its role in the resynthesis of ATP. So this first video is just looking at this single energy system. Now, the ATP-CP energy system, its role is to repair our energy molecule. So we said at the start, ATP is our energy molecule, where the phosphate ion breaks away from its bond and breaks away from the adenosine triphosphate bonds, and it results in adenosine diphosphate. Two phosphates are still attached to the adenosine molecule. Now, the energy system's role is to play its part and produce energy to repair this final bond and attach that final phosphate back to the molecule. When that happens, the energy molecule can be used again. How it does this is it uses its fuel, creatine phosphate, just like in the name. Creatine phosphate will be broken apart, and that releases energy, which helps repair or resynthesize the ATP bond. So it helps repair that energy molecule back to its original state so it can be used again. Pretty simple process, pretty simple molecule, just breaking apart and releasing and donating that energy. Now, if we look at our terminology and link it into this system, the ATP-CP energy system has a rapid or very fast rate. This happens instantaneously. This allows for maximal intensity to be achieved, 95 to 100% of our effort or our exertion. Unfortunately, though, on the flip side, the yield is very, very small, very finite, has a very distinct endpoint. We only get one ATP molecule per CP molecule, 1 for 1. And this results in a very short duration of performance, only lasting up to 10 seconds of continuous movement. If we look at interplay and how our energy systems contribute together, we can see that CP is only being able to contribute during continuous performance for around, as the main contributor, for around the first 10 seconds. It will still contribute indefinitely in very, very small amounts, but until we have a certain type of recovery, we are not able to replenish these stores. So it is the role of the ATP-CP energy system to resynthesize ATP at the commencement of exercise and during the first 10 seconds. This is during the initial phase of oxygen deficit. The reason for that is it is anaerobic. It does not require oxygen to break down. It's a simple bond that we're breaking apart to release energy, so it can happen instantaneously. It is our first energy system that we rely upon to repair ATP because of all of these characteristics. Unfortunately, as I said before, there is a trade-off between the rate and the yield. Now, we'll talk about the other energy systems in future videos, but the ATP-CP system has a very fast rate. It repairs our energy molecule very rapidly, but unfortunately the yield or the number of ATP that comes from this breaking down of CP molecules has a very, very low number of only 1 ATP. If we look at its relative contribution, we can see there in the yellow at the start, its power output is huge. Because of its rapid, instantaneous breaking down and replenishment of ATP, it can be used very, very well in that first initial phase of exercise, but very, very quickly depletes. It is a major contributor during the short duration maximal efforts, such as the 100-meter sprint. Perfect event, 10 seconds or less than 10 seconds for the elite athletes. It is a fantastic energy system to allow for these maximal contractions and explosive efforts for that 10 seconds of movement. But unfortunately, during and towards the end, it starts to deplete. Therefore, we cannot maintain our maximal intensity. But it also contributes during explosive efforts after periods of passive recovery. So I mentioned before about a certain type of recovery, and unfortunately the only way we can get CP stores back is by standing still or stopping. If we are still moving around, if we are still working, if we are still exerting and having muscle contractions, then we are not going to get a large amount of CP stores back. One reason why AFL players have 30 seconds on the shot clock is because 30 seconds allows for a significant amount of ATP and CP stores to be replenished. This then allows the system, the ATP-CP system, to work effectively again, not to its overall capacity, but a significant amount of its capacity can be reproduced. Now, we mentioned that with and associated to energy systems is fatigue. Okay, you can see Usain Bolt leading the pack in the 100-meter sprint there, but even he will be starting to experience fatigue towards the end of his 100-meter sprint. So when we get to the point of CP depletion, it means that this energy system is starting to be significantly hindered. When we don't have creatine phosphate stores, the ATP-CP energy system has a very significant decrease in its output. If we don't have the ATP-CP system contributing in large amounts, then we have to rely on another energy system. Anaerobic glycolysis will increase its reliance or increase its contribution the further we go through an event where our CP stores are depleting. Unfortunately, this system cannot supply the resynthesis of ATP at such a rate that creatine phosphate can. It has a slower rate of ATP resynthesis, resulting in slower and less forceful muscle contractions, therefore decreasing our output and our overall intensity. And we can see this in times. If we look at this as a bit of a data analysis, we can see in the 200-meter sprint, which goes for Usain Bolt, 19.1 seconds, we can see that after the 10-second mark or the 100-meter mark, time starts increasing quite significantly. So from 50 to 100 meters, he can complete that 50-meter part in 4.32 seconds, whereas the next 50 meters jumps by 0.31 seconds. A third of a second it takes longer for him to cover that 50-meter section. This is a very significant drop in speed and intensity, and this could be a significant difference between optimal output or winning the race. A likely question that you will receive is, what is the most likely cause of fatigue for a runner in a 100-meter sprint? 100-meter sprint, 10 seconds, maximal effort, short duration, explosive movements. Hopefully, you're able to see that depletion of CP stores. Nowhere near long enough for dehydration or depleting muscle glycogen. Very minimal contribution from those systems associated to that sort of fatigue. There will be a little increase in hydrogen ions, but not enough to accumulate an impact on output. So due to the maximum intensity, short duration, almost 10 seconds of the 100-meter sprint, rapid depletion of CP stores will occur. As I said before, if we don't have our creatine phosphate stores, ATP resynthesis becomes slower due to using another energy system which does not have the same rate. If we look at the difference in another possible question, we look at 2020 cricket versus Test cricket. And this was a question that popped up on a past exam a few years ago. 2020 cricket is very much a short format, trying to pack more movement into a short amount of time, whereas Test cricket is a longer duration, more breaks, more gaps. Hopefully that's starting to allude to what we're looking at. But make sure whenever you read a question, you're looking at the overall context. Elite fast bowlers sprint approximately 20 metres to the wicket before making an all-out effort. All out meaning maximal, sprint meaning maximal. Then they walk back to the mark and bowl another ball. Walking back, submaximal, so not exerting a large amount of effort. Each ball, including recovery, takes approximately 30 seconds. So 20-metre sprint, bowl the ball, walking back 30 seconds in total. Each over 6 balls takes approximately 3 to 4 minutes. Bowlers deliver the ball at an average of 140 kilometres an hour during a test match, and they bowl approximately 20 overs in the day. When playing the T20, they bowl 145 kilometres an hour and deliver a maximum of 4 overs. So their output's greater. They're working at a higher intensity. But they don't bowl as many overs, so they have more recovery time. If you're bowling and have a larger volume of performance, then it normally means you have less recovery time. So the question says, name the most likely cause of fatigue of fast bowlers. Well, if they've sprinted in 20 metres, they've bowled a ball and then walked back, and that's taken 30 seconds, well, the actual performance and the exertion has been very, very short in duration, but very maximal in intensity. Therefore, hopefully, you're able to identify that PC or CP, doesn't matter which one you say, depletion would have been the main cause of fatigue. Now, if we look at the understanding of what this actually means, fast bowlers are able to bowl faster in the T20 matches as they're able to use their anaerobic systems more than in a test match. As the fast bowler sprints to the wicket, they will use their ATP-PC system predominantly or as the main contributor. Just a note, VCAA, when you see these past reports, VCAA are moving away from the word predominant and dominant and moving more towards contribution. In a test match, due to the nature of cricket, they do not have the required time, 30 seconds for 70%, and I'll talk about recovery in a minute, to fully replenish their stores. So as we said before, if we cannot use our PC stores, we have to rely on another energy system that is slower. Slower ATP results in a lower intensity. In a T20 match, players only need to bowl 4 overs. Each ball gives 25 seconds of recovery. They should be able to bowl with higher maximum speeds. Okay, and they said here, students who performed well on this question evaluated the information provided. So you have to link in information from the context of the question to get full marks. If you can associate maximum effort, link that into an energy system. If you can associate extended performance, then you have to link that in. So intensity, duration, rate, and yield will be hinted in the context of the question. Now, to recover from this system is pretty simple. We have to stop. We have to be passive. We have to slow and stop muscle contractions. So the best thing you can do is lie down. Standing is okay. Standing, you're still going to get it back, but lying down is going to be ideal. Anything where the muscle is reducing its capacity or contraction, this is the only way to replenish your CP stores. Okay, so be as still as possible and perform what we call a passive recovery. 30 seconds of passive recovery will give us 70% of our CP stores, pretty rapid in the beginning at the start of exercise, and then it gets slower and slower to get a certain percentage back. 2 to 3 minutes of passive recovery will give us 90%, and up to 10 minutes will give us 100%. Hence why, if you think 20 seconds or a minute timeout in NBA is giving a significant portion of PC stores back. The 30-second shot clock in AFL for a set shot on goal is giving a significant portion of our CP stores back. A 5-minute half-time break or quarter-time break in any sport will allow for recovery of this system and replenishment of CP stores. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that was helpful. And the next video series episode will be the anaerobic glycolysis energy system, followed by the final section of our energy system characteristics, and I will talk about the aerobic system.